The year is 1922. In the quiet countryside of Bavaria, Germany, there stood a small, isolated farmstead known as Hinterkaifeck. It was a place shaped by distance from neighbours, distance from towns, and most importantly, distance from help. Surrounded by open fields and forest, the farm followed a steady rhythm. Animals fed at dawn, work completed before nightfall, and silence settling in after dark. But during the spring of that year, that rhythm was completely broken. What happened at Hinterkaifeck would become one of the most disturbing and unresolved cases in German criminal history. Not because of what was seen, but because of what was discovered, piece by piece, after it was already too late. Hinterkaifeck was home to 6 people, all connected by family or work. At the centre of the household was Andreas Gruber, the farm's owner. He was an older man by 1922, known locally as strict, deeply private and uncompromising in how the farms run. Living with him was his wife, Kazelia. She rarely left the property and was described as quiet, spending most of her time managing household tasks and helping with the farm when needed. Their adult daughter, Victoria, also lived at Hinterkaifeck. She had returned to the farm after the death of her husband and helped care for both the land and her children. Victoria had 2 young children. Her daughter, Kazelia, named after her grandmother, attended school in a nearby area and was said to be lively and curious. Her younger son, Joseph, was still very young and remained on the farm at all times. The 6th person living at Hinterkaifeck was Maria Baumgartner, a newly hired maid. She had arrived at the farm only days before the incident and was still unfamiliar with both the property and the family's routines. Together, they formed a small, insular household spanning 3 generations, largely cut out from the outside world. Life on the farm followed a strict routine. Animals were fed at the same times each day, work was done before nightfall, and evenings were always quiet. Neighbours later recalled that the family kept themselves to themselves, rarely socialising and seldom asking for help. Hinterkaifeck was not a place people visited casually. The isolation would later become one of the most important details of the case because when something went wrong, there was nobody nearby to notice. In the days leading up to March 1922, nothing at Hinterkaifeck appeared dramatically out of place. Life on the farm continued as it always had. Animals were tended to, work was carried out, and evenings passed in quiet routine. But beneath that surface normality, small irregularities began to appear. Footprints were noticed in the snow near the edge of the property. They led from the forest towards the farm buildings, but what made them unusual was that no matching tracks were seen leaving the area. Around the same time, members of the household reportedly heard unexplained sounds coming from the attic during the night, movement that could not easily be accounted for. Home, a newspaper appeared that no one recalled bringing in. Several sets of keys also went missing, but none of these details caused immediate alarm. Individually, these mishaps could be accounted for. A mistake, a coincidence, something easily overlooked in the rhythm of daily life. And so, nothing was reported, no one investigated further, and Hinterkaifeck remained quiet. But as the days passed, that quiet began to change, not suddenly, but subtly. The family was no longer seen in nearby areas. Routine interactions stopped, and small absences began to add up. It would take time before anyone realised that the silence was no longer normal. Eventually, the neighbours' concerns got the better of them and they decided to investigate the property. Upon entrance, members of the household were found unresponsive in different areas of the building, some in the barn and others within the living quarters. At that moment, the neighbours' worst fears were confirmed. Every inhabitant of the farm had not survived whatever had taken place there. And it was immediately clear that this was not the result of illness or accident. Something deliberate had taken place, something that could only be described as serious foul play. Yet, aside from where and how the deceased were found, the farm itself appeared untouched. Rooms were orderly, possessions were undisturbed, and there were no signs of struggle spreading through the house, and no clear indication of panic or disorder. Just absence. Authorities were immediately notified and the farm was soon filled with people. Investigators, helpers, locals, all trying to understand what had happened here. But during those first critical hours, the scene was not sealed off. Too many people came and went, and in the process, the quiet order of the farm and much of the evidence it held was unintentionally disturbed. By the time the full weight of the discovery had settled in, the opportunity for clear answers had already begun to slip away. Despite these challenges, investigators were able to establish several key facts. The victims had met their demise as a result of severe head trauma, consistent across multiple individuals. There were no defensive wounds reported, which suggested there was no prolonged struggle. The injuries were determined to have been caused by a single blunt instrument used repeatedly. Importantly, there were no signs of forced entry into the home. Doors and windows were intact, and locks showed no damage. Valuable items such as money and personal belongings were left completely untouched, ruling out robbery as a motive. The positioning of the victims suggested that they had been separated and attacked individually, or at least in small numbers rather than all at once. This indicated planning and familiarity with the environment. Additional details raised further questions. Food had been prepared in the kitchen after the estimated time of death, animals had been fed and cared for, and smoke was seen rising from the chimney in the days following the incident. These observations strongly suggested that someone remained on the property after the deaths had occurred. Not briefly, but for an extended period of time. This behaviour was highly unusual and deeply unsettling to investigators. Authorities questioned numerous suspects, former farm workers, neighbours and travellers passing through the region. At various points, suspicion even fell on individuals connected to the investigation itself. However, early mistakes hindered progress. Evidence had been moved, witness accounts conflicted, and key details were lost before they could even be documented properly. Despite multiple inquiries over the years, no individual was ever formally charged. Naturally, this led to several theories emerging. But according to the most widely accepted theory, the individual responsible was not a stranger. They were someone familiar with the farm, someone who understood the layout, the routines, and of course, the isolation. Investigators believe this person may have entered the property quietly, possibly before the night the deaths occurred. There was no signs of forced entry, suggesting access was gained without resistance, either through an unlocked door or by already being inside. From there, the theory suggests the individual waited, not hiding in panic, not rushing, but remaining unseen, possibly in the attic or one of the connected storage spaces. This would explain the early reports of unexplained sounds overhead, as well as the footprints in the snow that led towards the house but never away. At some point, members of the household were separated. Rather than confronting everyone at once, the theory proposes that individuals were encountered one by one, away from the others, reducing the chance of alarm or resistance. This would align with how and where the victims were later found. Afterward, the behaviour becomes even more unusual. Instead of fleeing the scene, evidence suggests the person remained. Animals were fed, food was prepared, and daily tasks continued. Strangely, investigators found no signs of urgency or disorder, which led to the belief that whoever was there felt no immediate pressure to leave. There was not a hurried escape, it was a continuation. Only after several days, once the risk of discovery had increased, does the theory suggest the individual finally left the property. Quietly. Without drawing attention, without leaving behind anything that could clearly identify them. No tracks, no missing valuables, no confirmed sightings, just absence. Eventually, the Hinterkaifeck farm was abandoned. Years later, the buildings were demolished and the land returned to quiet. But the case never truly closed. The Hinterkaifeck farm murders were never solved. What remains is not just a mystery of responsibility, but of behaviour. Calm, deliberate actions carried out in complete isolation. Some stories end with conclusions, and others remain suspended in time. But more than a century later, the Hinterkaifeck murders remains one of the most mysterious, unsolved cases in history.